Well, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm very excited to speak about the opportunities that we're seeing now in the metaverse. My name is Pico Velasquez, and I am native from Colombia, like originally from Colombia, grew up in Bogota and came to the US to do my studies. And therefore, most of the professional work that I've done so far have been, I guess, like more globalized to this extent. I'm very excited to share about what we've been working so far, both as me individually through my career since I started off as an architect, to now more in the way that we're integrating it with digital media, virtual worlds, and now the metaverse and blockchain. So thank you so much for being here, and I'm just going to start with the presentation. So designing the metaverse. When we talk about designing the metaverse, we technically think about what does it mean to have a virtual world, right? And I think especially with the definitions that the metaverse holds today, whether it's through Snow Crash or it's through Meta and the type of I guess like the perspectives in which the industries or different industries are tackling it, we believe that it is a virtual world, right? A virtual world that is integrated through blockchain, that can be opened or closed. Like the idea is for it to be an open metaverse, but of course there's going to be also some that are going to be closed metaverses as well. But it's really about like how are we going to be developing these virtual worlds and how are we going to be interacting within them. So in my practice, in my case specifically, I think what really fascinates me the most is that it's not just about virtual worlds alone, but it's really about being able to integrate physical worlds that already exist, right? That we've been building for the longest time, not only been building them as physical structures, but we've also been building them to be integrated with Web 2. So it's another part of like a digital component, especially when it comes with e-commerce. But now bringing it into the metaverse is just giving it that three-dimensional space, right? It's thinking about that it's no longer going to be just a website, but it's going to be a world in which people are going to be living in. So I'm gonna start with that, give a little bit of a background of the career that I've had, and starting off with architecture, you'll see the transition of building physical spaces, then what I would call multimedia spaces, and then going into what is metaverse design. So the type of projects that I've worked on so far really fall within these three categories, which is architecture in the sense that they're architectural buildings, computational design in the sense that it is data-driven design, where we take different components, whether it has to do with the design of how it's being done parametrically or computationally, in the sense that it's for complex geometry, but also in the sense that we're taking data that is also external to the project to inform the project itself, whether it's environmental data or sensor integration data, meaning that it comes from the movement of people or the interaction of people, or it could also be, as I mentioned, weather data, daylighting studies, fluid dynamics, but all of these are eventually going to be shaping the space or shaping the design. And then multimedia design, or how I came into being a multimedia director, is directing or composing what is the content, what is the information that's going to be on these digital screens, whether that information is on a phone or it's on a tablet or it goes into an LED screen or projection. It's essentially like giving visualization to a virtual world or a digital world that's going to be overlapped with the physical ones. So I've worked on several projects in the past years throughout my career, and I'm going to be highlighting a few just like for the linear narration that I want to give into the transition from physical to virtual. So as a designer, as an artist, architect, designer, a lot of the work that I do is also like mathematically driven. And what I mean by that is that it's either designed through a series of equations or it's designed by data that inform those equations and therefore define the form. This case specifically, it's a sculpture. This case, which they look kind of similar, but this is the structure for a museum. These are, again, like other fashion elements. So it's it doesn't really matter what the scale is. It doesn't matter what the function is. At the end, it's the elements of design, right? How do we design spaces? How do we design elements? And how do these pieces combine to make something new, whether it's something that is static or it's dynamic or it's something that's like evolving or generative, etc. So when we talk about architecture, and I think that the most relevant or prevalent thing that I want to be speaking here in terms of the metaverse is how does the design of architectural form end up affecting the way that people behave inside of it? And what I mean with behave is that the way that people move inside of a space really is determined by the shape of the architectural building, and whether this is something that we're fully aware of not. It does happen. The way that you sit in a theater, the way that you walk through a museum, the way that you look at books in a library. These are all things that are by design by the architectural building, and these are what we would call typologies. It's just what do each of these different forms or categories of buildings look like. Office buildings tend to look similar to each other, museums tend to look similar to each other, etc. Right? So why is this, right? And it has to do with the programming and how we want people to be acting inside. So the moment that we give form, or in a way be able to like transform this into something different, it really changes the way that people interact with the content or the program inside of it, and therefore it also changes the way that people form, communicate, and therefore build a community inside of there as well. So I'm going to start with a project Google headquarters, which was with Bjarke Ingels Group. And here, what was really interesting for us was thinking about how we're changing the shape of the office. Like, what does it mean to design an office for the 21st century, right? Where it's not just about doing like independent work, but it has a big component about a community aspect of seeing other people's shared work environments. So we go through like looking at the again, like the typologies, the form of how the office has evolved through time, from the Renaissance office to Taylorism to then action office, which led into the cube farm, and then work and play, which is what we would most likely relate to the movement of shared workspaces, for example, WeWork, right? And then from this element of being able to mix work and play and having an environment that is more flexible for the user, for the workspace, we see new buildings, for example, the Apple Park by Foster, which really like enhance this new form of behavior. And with Google, the idea here is that we really want to focus on what does it mean to have a community office? Like, what does it mean to have 7,000 people under one single roof that are spending like their day working, but also playing, also eating. There is different elements of different, I guess, like different programming, whether it's through entertainment or cultural, etc. But it's really about building a community that is working under the same ethos or for the same purpose. So when we thought about this design, the idea is like what is this canopy that can encapsulate everything that's inside of it, right? So if we're going to have a huge canopy that encapsulates an entire space for 7,000 people working inside, then how do we design it in a way that allows for everything else to be functional inside of it? So how are the acoustics going to be functional? How is the daylighting? When I mean daylighting, the natural daylighting that's going to pierce through the structure going to be functional? And essentially, like, how do we make sure that an environment like this ends up being or fulfilling the purpose that it was designed for? So this is where parametric design or computational design fits in the sense that it's no longer about just like designing a unique piece, but really understanding what are the parameters, what is the data that's going to be informing the shape of this building. In this case, the Google headquarters is a static building. It's not opening up or changing itself throughout the day or based on interaction. It's a static building, but even so, the way that designed, it's parametric. And I think that what's really relevant here to think is that the way that this is being designed, if it were to be in the metaverse, it's something that the data, because it's changing day by day, right? The data is changing day by day. It's changing also based on how the people are acting and behaving inside, as I mentioned. Then how could the building also be transforming, right? In the metaverse, in virtual spaces, things don't have to be static. Things don't have to be consistently the same. So it's a beautiful overlap of like, what are the aspects that could be the same, as we would call a digital double, between the physical and the virtual relationship of a building or a design, or like whether that design is from architecture to fashion or anything else that can go inside of the metaverse. But what's really interesting is to question that. What parts need to be the same? What parts could potentially be different? So these are renders of how it looked inside. And then this is the process of construction. It's been under construction for the past like 3-4 years now. It's very near completion. So yeah, this is Google. Another project that was very, very beautiful to work with and inspiring at the same time, that was also like questioning and positioning this the concept of what is the memorial, like what are spaces for commemoration of life, commemoration of death, like how are we used to doing this across history, across different countries, and essentially also how do you integrate this with what we would call our digital memories today, right? Because for like the 200 years ago, this is something that we would have not considered, but right now the library of our memories, it's not just physical components, it's not just memories of storytelling, but the storytelling has become become like a database of digital content that it's either on our phones or our computers, etc. So in a way, we have information about almost every human being that is alive right now, and what would happen if we were to compile this and try to understand humanity, or the essence of humanity, through it. So we looked at the royal pyramids of Egypt, of how they would worship, but also like commemorate gods. The cenotaph for Newton was another example. Berlin Jewish memorial, or memorials in general, that try to encapsulate or very successfully like draw to the empathy of certain historical moments that have caused pain in different countries by bringing individual elements that represent a whole. Or Dia de los Muertos, which is an event or like a ceremony that happens every year, mostly in Mexico, that's about commemorating, but with a positive aspect of death. And Burning Man Temple is another great example. And I think this one was the one that really kind of triggered us more, which was that in the Burning Man Temple, inside of it, you're not only just seeing names, or potentially just seeing like tombs, or like elements that are elements that are I would say that are similar between each other, but that still represent a whole. In Burning Man, the temple has elements that are very unique to the individual, in the sense that they're letters, they're objects, they're memories, specific memories of the people that they want to commemorate, or that they want to leave a message to. So we think about this also of like, what does it mean to have a collective memory that could be virtual, could be digital. We think about the Matrix architect scene where Neo gets to see multiple versions of his life from different perspectives, or X-Men Cerebro, where he gets to connect with multiple people simultaneously. And digital afterlife and I Remember. So like there's so many different apps and experimentations of like how we can hold these digital memories together. So for Elysium, which was a project done with Big as well, for the founder of Cirque du Soleil, we wanted to turn this into a museum, in which it was a museum of human lives that would have the physical but virtual component of what this shared experience would be. So the way that it's designed is a double spiral sphere projection, like projected over a sphere at different layers. So like you get to walk in one continuous shape that leads you to the top, and then it unveils itself and you walk in a parallel path that leads you to the center core of the building, which is a more shared experience. And what's really interesting about this is that when you look, or when you think about how most museums or libraries are designed, except for the Guggenheim, which the Guggenheim was definitely in New York City a great example, a reference of what we're working. They tend to be like subsequent adjacent spaces, juxtaposed spaces that you walk into, right? So there's a very specific narrative that you go into different rooms, you get to see things on the wall, so it's just like a subset of rooms. Here, same as the Guggenheim with other digital components, etc. The idea is that you want to have a continuous path. It's almost like going to the museum or going to this memorial, to the Elysium, is one continuous journey. So like one continuous journey that you go through the path experience, and then when you come out with a different mindset. So as you're going up, this is how it looks. As you're walking through what we would call the library of lives, you get to see these different beacons that you can take out and see individually if you wanted to. And then there's an area in the center, which is the part where it all comes together, which is the ceremonial dome in the memorial release. So the ceremonial dome is the more shared or communal experience where people come together to commemorate a certain event. And the memorial release, it's a more intimate moment where at the end of the whole experience, each user or yeah, each participant gets to leave a message of how they feel, what they dream, what they felt. And I think that the beauty about this is that it's no longer about just designing a static building where you go in and out and you don't have like that presence of the human experience. But here there's a recording of it, and at the end of the day you end up with all this like beautiful recording of the thousands of tens of thousands of people that walked there and learned or had had something that they want to share to the rest of the world. And at the end of the day, that message gets released, the memorial release, and a new day begins with a blank canvas. Samsung, which is another project that continues to push in this direction, right? As we're talking about multimedia spaces and how these two combine. The Samsung, which was designed by Kenzo Digital, is more around the essence of really presenting you with your digital self or with your virtual identity or digital identity. So when you enter this building, it's a small installation with mirrors that looks infinite. So it's an incredible experience as well when you talk about or when you think about immersive experiences, right? That you're inside of it instead of looking at it. There's something very powerful about this. You plug into your Instagram and you're all of a sudden surrounded by your virtual self. So this confrontation is something that, as an installation, really provides an opportunity and not only like an incredible experience, but really about understanding who are we creating with our virtual identities, who is the type of person that we have become in a way, because we used to think of it, social media, as something that was happening parallel to our lives, but right now it's sometimes even more predominant what we do what we do through these applications that we do in our physical lives, and how it affects us and how it affects our workspace and how it affects how we position ourselves, whether we're becoming ourselves brands or not, but it's how we position ourselves to a global audience. These are all photographs, which is very breathtaking experience that was done in different cities around the world. And then this is the last architectural project that I'm going to speak of as we move on to speaking more about the metaverse, which is around the theater, so the Onga Theater. And the theater is a space that we go to the theater, and I mean, we go to the theater whether it's for opera or concerts or cinema, which is a very similar format. And we don't really question the shape of it, right? We go and sit in a proscenium stage, which is very prototypically as the Greek theater, where you're looking into a space. You're looking, whether it's a box or a screen, but everyone is looking into the same direction. And the way that these spaces are formed essentially end up also affecting or guiding, in a way, potentially constraining how the content is produced for it. Meaning that as we go to the theater and witness or like a performance that is happening on a stage, the fact that the stage is always the same shape, it ends up driving the narration, the way that it's being expressed. It also drives the narrative structure. It's a one directional. You're always looking into the same location. You see it almost like a two-dimensional space, because even if it's 3D, you're seeing it like as a flat space. And it has to happen linearly, because everything that happens in front of you is passing through time. If you compare this to the Japanese kabuki theater, where the audience is actually sitting in the center, it's sitting inside of the theater. You have the hamachis, the corridors, where performers are walking throughout. There's a main stage, but there's still like these different corridors and way to I guess like to acknowledge and observe the show. You realize that this opens up to another form of theater in terms of the content that it's being produced, in the sense that there's simultaneous stories happening. There's also an evolution of characters that happen real life on stage. And then because of the different balconies and the seating inside, there's also the sense that you can go to the theater and sit in different locations and perceive it differently, which is also very interesting. And we see these cases also more like from a theoretical perspective, for like the panopticon theater, where it's all about looking outwards. There you definitely have like a multiple simultaneous stories happening, which is in a way similar to the scene of the Matrix, but also like theorists like Maholi Nagy have really questioned about like who's the audience and who's the performer, who's watching who. And in this case, which is like an intertwined helix of two slides, where one is going like one ramp is going upward, where at that point you're the observer, and then when you're going downwards on the slide, you become the performer. You're really like playing with the concept of like what's the role of the audience, what's the role of the performer, can they be intertwined, can they be interchanged, and yeah, and I think all these types of questions, like theoretical or not, really make us wonder if we were to design a theater differently, what would this look like? And as virtual reality started pushing forward, especially like 5 to 10 years ago, we saw that a lot of different types of narrative started to evolve with this three-dimensional aspect. And whether it's projection mapping in spaces, what we would call location-based entertainment, or whether it's more inside of VR, you could see like different films and different narratives, whether it's from gaming to other forms of entertainment that were posted inside of there. There's something like really interesting about thinking that you're inside of the show instead of looking at it. And so with the amphitheater, what we were mostly targeting was, how do we do this but as a physical experience where multiple people can come together to be inside of a show instead of looking at it. So it's like we should place the audience in the center, the audience in the center looking outward. This has gone through multiple iterations. So there's one where there's a single pod, there's one with multiple pods, but essentially it's you're in a space where there's content and performers and that are just like happening all around. So it becomes a spatial performance instead. The idea of having digital content, of having LED screens or projection mapping as digital content around, also give this the essence, or the I guess like the most important part about the experience in VR and digital media is being able to have it be consistently changing. So like a dynamic content that is changing through the story, which is a lot more exhilarating than it is to watch like a traditional theater show where it's not. And you can see in theater right now as well, especially you see spaces like Broadway that have incorporated and concerts as well that have incorporated LED screens for this reason. And in the amphitheater, having it full surround 360 on the floor and on the ceiling, what that also produced was the opportunity for you to create infinite spaces. This idea that you're inside of a space that could potentially like expand and contract and really make you feel like you're a part of it, and again, not being framed by the LED screen. So these are images by Team Lab, but that really showcase that although it's flat screens and it's not like an actual 3D virtual environment like you would have in VR, it's still a very powerful experience to be inside of it. So with this new type of theater format, and this is where we go down to like really breaking down and understanding typologies and how new forms of architecture, new forms of design can really change and evolve different forms of programming or of industries in general, is that 360 projections make it immersive content that is dynamic, ambisonic acoustics, meaning that the acoustics are also spatial. So it's like, what does it mean to create these environments where the sound is moving around the space and not just like only coming from a single direction? Smart tracking technologies, whether it's a combination of only the performers and the audience, or it's also the digital content that is being connected to it. But it's really about understanding that what's that relationship of interactivity between all the different parties that are in the space, and how essentially it's not about pre-choreographing or predetermining where movement is going to happen or how lights are going to move, or, you know, like between like the movement or the performance and the lights and the digital content. It's not about timing it and consistently doing exactly the same steps, but it's more free form of however the show is going to evolve, everything else can adapt to it. In a way, every show will be unique based on this, because there's different types of interactions. The audience will behave differently, and maybe the performers do as well. So how beautiful would it be if every show, using the same the same underlying infrastructure of how it's designed, it still ends up being a different performance just because it's data driven. And then the 360 rigging is this idea that why would you have the performers only on the floor? give the opportunity for them to also be flying, to be walking around the walls, and like really turn it into a spatial experience. So these are images of how that theater, because it has evolved through different iterations. So these are more images of it. And in a way, this has been a project, the Hard Rock Casino and Hotel, in which Rockwell Group and Lab at Rockwell Group invited me to participate, which held a lot of the same concepts and the ethos of what we wanted to do with the Omega Theater, which is this idea that you're into a space, trying to be as immersive as possible, where you can have controlled lighting, controlled content, digital content, and just turn it into to a really like multi-sensory experience. So this space is called the Oculus. It's the entrance to the Hard Rock Casino and Hotel in Florida. It was built 2 years ago, so even if it looks like renders, it's actually built. Hope you guys can see it. And it's incredibly dynamic, and it has controlled LED lights that happen at different levels throughout the building. It has the low-res LED columns here on the side that are also triggered by the digital content that is projected on a back wall. It has a waterfall in the center, an incredible waterfall designed by Wet, which has also different aspects of data-driven design, in the sense that part of it is a pixelized, that pistons are pixelized so that you can have it going to the rhythm of the music, and another part that undulates based on pressure. And then I'm going to show you a video so that you can see this space, like this physical space, dynamically through these different layers of media, like what we would call multimedia, come to life. So similar to this, but to another degree of what we would talk about the interactivity and how this digital content or this digital layer comes to be, is another project that I worked on with Rockwell Group in the lab, which is in 299 Park Avenue in New York City. And it's a 60-foot wall LED screen in which we have sensors, on lighter sensors on the ceiling, which means that as the audience, or like what we would call like the customer, or the person that is walking into the lobby of this building, start moving around the space, they end up informing the content that is happening on the screen. So this piece in particular, it's called Bloom. I worked with them on 3 different pieces, Bloom, Horizon, and Spectacle. But this one in particular, what was very beautiful about it was that it was this continuous evolution of blooming of different species of flowers that would just be changing color, like all very gradually, very subtle. So changing colors, changing size, blooming, dissipating. And what was really interesting was just being able to see how that slight transition made the canvas, or this painting, what we would call like a new canvas of art, was really feeling that it was alive, that it was like this organic evolution that was unpredictable, that like not even me as the main artist could even predict how it was going to look every day, because essentially what were the parameters that put it together was a randomized color set that would be chosen in the mornings, and then that color set would change, would loop at different times, and then the amount of the paths in which the flowers and all the I guess like the core bundles, the bundles of flowers would move, was something that was like a series of different curves that would also be randomized. And then the amount of flowers and how they would bloom just came to being with how the people would interact in the space. So this like really like when we break down how we're designing content, virtual content, digital content, I think what a very important thing to consider is that all of these things are dynamic. Like when you design a physical building, like unless you build it all with LED walls or projection mapping like we did for the Oculus, things are static and they're going to be like a predetermined in a certain way. But here, everything can change, and I think that's the beauty about working in digital and virtual environments, is that you can really have like these, what we would call like these dynamic transitions, right? So it's like a continuous transformations that can be caused by factors that have to do with the audience, with the artist, or with the environments that it's surrounded in. So these are, for example, some of the assets that we had in the space. So the from the different species of flowers is one in particular, but as it passes through time, it changes colors, right? And there's just like something really interesting to see that even if it's exactly the same position and the same assets, changing colors like really changes the experience. So just imagine that in a virtual space, you have the opportunity to change shapes, to change density of spaces, to change colors, to change textures, to change. I mean, things can be dynamic. There's just so much that can happen. And in this one specifically, or like the ones that we've been working on mostly that are LED walls. What happens here is that we're talking about different layers of interactivity, right? So the background is something that happens with, especially with color hues, but then the midground is where all these the major elements lie, and this is all built on Unreal or Unity, so it's like gaming engines that can manage content real time. And then the foreground becomes something that is lighter, more like a particle system that is easier for gestures and effects. And activations, there's like different forms of activations, but what's really interesting here is to think that as an individual moving through the space or as a conglomerate, you end up creating almost like attractor areas where things happen specifically because of your presence. And again, this is all about like really changing or understanding that relationship between a digital wall or the digital content with the physical being, which is that how is this a consistent dialogue of communication and evolution that is just like continuously happening in a loop instead of one directional, how we were used to doing things before. And the same goes with sound, in the sense that when we talk about sound, not only that sound can be interactive, but we talk about sound as a space that is that it takes on like the volume of the space instead of like only in one direction. Like you really are able to play with the transitions and the I guess like the effects that it can generate by having sound at these different layers and levels. So imagine like sound that is like coming up to be almost like sprinkles of sound versus sound that comes from the floor and rises deeply, or that comes from a space and then goes through you. There's just like something like a very like magical and also like in a way just like a different form of experience, like that goes beyond what we're used to experiencing. So I think what's really beautiful about this is really thinking that if we're inside of a new form of meeting, or we have technology that opens up the opportunity to do things different, how far can we push it to really start seeing the different components that we would use to create these experiences in its full opportunity and assets, right? So it's like, what does it mean to compose music in space instead of just composing music in time? These are images of 299 Park Avenue and the flowers. Some of the flowers blooming and how they change depending on interaction. So I'm going to speak now about virtual worlds, and the transition to this is mainly around that when you're designing, like I mentioned, the digital content on these walls. What's really fascinating is that element of interaction, right? So it's like the more detailed that virtual world can become, the more it becomes like a very intimate, but also, like we said, dynamic relationship between the audience and the digital content. And what's interesting to think is that the virtual world, in this case, for 299 Park Avenue for Bloom, was a single world that was not inhabited, right? So the virtual world only had flowers. There wasn't other users that could access the virtual world. But what we're seeing with the metaverse is that the virtual worlds are inhabited, whether it's a video game or it's through more decentralized platforms, which is what we're seeing more as the definition of the metaverse so far, is about connecting a physical world that could interact also with a virtual world that also has users, right? So what we're doing here, and what we're doing with a lot of different companies in different industries, from concerts to fashion to we have some projects that include entire cities, is that we model out whether it's a version of digital double of that city or it's an extended version of that city. We model out those two worlds. And so we have the physical world, we have the virtual world, and then we choose how we're going to connect it. And before I go into more details of how this looks in future projects, I want to go back a little bit and talk about a video game world that I was a part of last year, or maybe almost 2 years ago now, called Superforest. And this one, it was really impactful in the way that they are merging the physical and virtual worlds. And I thought that it would be inspirational for people to hear, because this really highlights the difference between just creating entertainment and being able to use entertainment for the sake of something bigger. So in this case, is entertainment the sake of education and environmental impact. So Superforest is an MMO, so it's a multiplayer video game where you build your own forest. And when you build your own forest, what you're doing is that, very similar to what you would do like in SimCity, you're using building blocks, but the building blocks here are seeds. So you put seeds of different species. Then these species grow, and they grow differently depending on the factors of the land, of the altitude, of even of how you take care of it, right? So it's like your SimCity with a Tamagotchi, where you really are part of the building of your forest. And then depending on how your forest is built, it evolves to create different species at different levels. So from what we would call like the lower level species, from plants to more like different animals, birds. We even have spiritual animals, like a spiritual jaguar that you'll see in some of the photos, etc. So it's really beautiful to think that a world that is as immersive and as gamified as something like this actually has a bigger purpose, which is that it's an impact platform where it's all about reforestation. So every time that you're planting a seed, you're actually not just planting a seed in the virtual world, but through these different NGO partnerships around the world, you're planting a seed in real life. And you get to track that impact, and you get to map out and be informed of how the trees that you're planting in real life are also growing and are also developing biomes for different species globally. So when I think of projects like this, like, it really inspires me to think out of the box of like, how do we make sure that video games or entertainment in general consistently be able to loop back to the physical world in a way that is with the best possible positive outcome and impact, but also how is the metaverse going to play a role in like really creating this integration, so it doesn't become just like a dystopian society where we want to live in a virtual world that is perfect and controlled, and then everything else, or uncontrolled, but that everything else in the physical world is left behind. So it's like, how do we make sure that we really tie those together and integrate them properly? So when we look at the metaverse right now, I think it's really important to understand where it's coming from, how it's being built, what are the the underlying underlying infrastructures and applications that led to this moment. So we can categorize this especially in three forms. There's obviously more things that have affected the space, but we can say that group calls and chats, especially during COVID, the fact that people were having from business meetings, and we still do today, but from business meetings to social dinners, etc., online on Discord or on Zoom, this was a big underlying factor of how we're building community online, and community in the sense that it's real-time community, right, which is very different from the type of community that we build on social media, because it's not happening at the same time. You leave a message, you like something, but you see something later, right? You're not all at the same time, unless it's an Instagram story, and then Instagram live and what we're seeing in other platforms have also come from the evolution of these different group community chats, etc. Then the other aspect of it is virtual worlds, and virtual worlds mostly attains to video games. Like now we're seeing virtual worlds, like we said, the decentralized virtual worlds, which is mostly Decentraland, Sandbox, Spatial. There's a lot of different companies coming up in this space. But what's really interesting here is that all of a sudden virtual worlds, especially like in Fortnite and in Roblox, weren't just designed to be played. Like they're not just designed to be mission driven or conquest or quest driven like you would see in most video games, like especially these big MMOs like League of Legends, etc. But it's really about being able to also create a community and have social events inside. So during COVID, we also saw that Fortnite hosted concerts, which were incredibly successful, that were mentioned a little bit more afterwards. But this, and the fact that in Roblox you would see even schools performing classes and like also building a huge educational component to it, is that there's something about people being able to use a digital avatar to connect with other people. So it's not just about connecting in a two-dimensional way or two-dimensional screen like we have in social media, but it's about connecting in a spatial format, where the distance that you have between users and users and players, between each other or in groups, etc., plays a role. And also the fact that it's interactive, that you can use your hands, you have different ways of expressing yourself. All of these are just extra layers that started building into like, how are we creating these, what we would call like these social spaces, or architectural spaces, in which the metaverse is gonna evolve from. And then the last part, as you can imagine, social media is obviously a huge component because it connects us to the world, and that's something that had not been done before, right? We were not used to being able to communicate or connect to people that we were not physically being connected to. So social media like really opened up that door to being a global platform where anyone and everyone could connect to whoever they wanted to, and to follow in different formats these celebrities or these institutions, etc. So all of this combined with many other aspects you can imagine, from the narrative storytelling that's going to be coming from film, etc., is what is laying out the spatial component, or like the design component of the metaverse. So with virtual concerts, especially, I think what was a big trigger and like the inception of how the metaverse movement ended up peaking, it comes mostly from just realizing that virtual concerts were getting 20 million, 10 million, 100 million views. And what does it mean for it all of a sudden, like a music artist, to have that many fans be able to participate in their concerts? And it essentially just means that they get to connect more with the people that they care about, with the people that support them, with the people that follow their journey. So if an artist, obviously there's like a monetary component that is interesting for a lot of people as well, but essentially, like, if an artist, if a company, if an institution, if a person, individual can connect with multiple people simultaneously in the tens, if not millions, whether it's as a single space or as through different shards, and that's something that technologically is going to continue to advance. But it still allows for as I mentioned, like that really, really intimate component that is a global intimacy that didn't exist before. So we see that this took off in different directions. So social media turning into Meta, Epic Games raising over $1 billion to build its version of the metaverse. It's like everyone's really thinking about like, okay, so how are we going to evolve to a version that really allows us to like understand and develop the tools for these opportunities. So we see that the way that these opportunities have risen have really gone across industry. Mostly fashion and art, entertainment are the ones that start the most, but you'll start seeing that education, health, and other spaces are really trying to tackle this as well. So we're seeing mostly 4 pillars of what are we calling like the shifts that are guiding us to the metaverse. So there's a technology shift, an experience shift, a creator shift, and a consumer shift. The technology shift is that underlying technology, blockchain, NFTs, and Web3, the fact that it's open code, the fact that it's decentralized, that it can have interoperability between the ecosystems. It really allows the opportunity to create new models for economic and data structures. And in this sense, especially as we can see through NFTs and art, it really shifted the game between the relationship between the creator, like the artist, and the buyer or the collector. And this is something that stands as a as an incredible proof of concept of the power of blockchain that isn't just for economical purpose, but also in terms of social and community building purposes. The experience shift, and this is something that we have spoken before, but it's the experience is changing, right? The same way as VR changed experience, same as gaming changed experience, and film in its way, in its time also changed experience. The metaverse is really creating a new form of being able to have to have absolutely anything that we want to have inside of it, because in this case it's not just entertainment or education, but it's really or cultural, but it's really about to tackle absolutely every industry. So we see this as the convergence of gaming, social media, and other platforms combined. So what's important here, especially, and this is something that that you could see a little bit, like again, like when we're working on physical projects, and a lot of the projects that I worked before, like there's a vision, but not everything is able to be executed. But what we mostly see is really being able to have that interaction. And I think that's something really important for the experience shifts, is that people want to have spaces, want to have experiences again that are personalized and that are customized and they're interactive. So it's not just about, we were talking about it, of the theater, of like passively viewing it, an experience, but being able to be inside of it and for it to adapt and to change based on how you behave. The creator shift is that creators like artists and brands, including companies, they want to diversify. And obviously, as technology moves forward, each industry adapts to new forms of connecting with their customer. And in this case, obviously, blockchain has opened up a lot of new doors with NFTs. So new mediums and technologies, we say, bring new types of products. And this type of new products is something that we're seeing right now. So like, what does it mean for there to be virtual or digital products, right? So especially for companies like fashion brands. So it's like, what does it mean to have a virtual dress, and is it connected to your physical dress, or how do these two relate? And then the consumer shift, this is where I think I find it interesting in all perspectives for sure, but I think one of the most interesting ones for me is a consumer shift. The fact that the communities, the fan, the customer, whoever is the person buying, collecting, or being a fan, is not only more connected to the product or to the artist that they're buying into, but they become part owners. They're investments. They're investing in. It's like your time is no longer just used for advertisement, dollars and eyeballs for other companies, but it's used as an investment to the companies or to whatever artists that you want to support. And there's something like really powerful about this, because it's really about integrating society with everything. It's like a cleaner and more sustainable ecosystem on the long run. So when we look at designing these experiences, because through my company VIIRA, we're working. It's all very early stage, so we haven't launched any of this yet. But we're working with a lot of big companies, and what's very beautiful about this is that we're really trying to tackle in different industries. How do we present a new form of a new form of any form of everything. And I think this comes down to like, what is the typology, right? So when we break down the typology of an office, how do we create an office inside of the metaverse? How do we create a museum inside of the metaverse? How do we create retail spaces? How do we create basically everything we have from as I mentioned, from cities to museums, to educational spaces, and it really comes down to what I would say are these 5 factors, which is that we have the experience, right? We build out the world, we build out the experience. We have the e-commerce component, which is the transactions and the way that we're going to have these products that are going to make the economy sustainable. I think it's also very important for us to have that impact component of like how we link it to the physical world in a way that is the most impactful for the people and the planet. These different events that are going to be creating community, and the community, which is essentially what brings everything together. So when we look at this right now, I think what's really interesting to think is that when we're designing these spaces, we still have to put them inside of existing platforms. And the platforms that exist right now look like this. And I'll show you what they're going to be and how it's going to evolve to look something different. But currently, the metaverse is either inside of a video game, so like Fortnite, Roblox. We don't consider them per se in the terms of metaverse, but Roblox has play to earn games. Fortnite is having events that like social events that are driving millions of users, plus the investment that they have for the metaverse. You can imagine that both of these platforms with 200 million plus users monthly each are going to be integrating blockchain or integrating a component to the metaverse at some point. So these are going to become metaverses. And then we have the decentralized platforms that are more crypto native, which are the Decentraland, CryptoVoxel, Sandbox. And here it's more about a plot of land that brings all these different lots where people can build. So it's like focusing more almost like a very direct translation of how the physical world works, in the sense that you buy a piece of land, you build your property, and then people walk through it, very, like using foot traffic for marketing per se. But I think what's really interesting is that none of these models are going to be the unique models. There's going to be so many different models that are going to arise, but the most important thing is how they're going to be linked between them. Because just like websites, it's not just about having the individual website, but it's how you can hyperlink or move from one place to another. So the accessibility, the interoperability, the way that assets can convert between them, that's one of the reasons why it's very important for it to be on the blockchain. There might be some that are going to be closed and not be on the blockchain, right? So what are going to be the rules for you to be able to enter, potentially bring in your own data or your own assets, including your own avatars or the things that you collect, like your art, your NFTs, your potential architecture, your houses, like you're going to be able to move them around. So I think it's very important to think about what is the file transition or the file formats that are going to be able to be used universally for this. So when we break it down to the layers of this, this is essentially what are the underlying layers of all of these worlds, which is that there's a blockchain, and it's not going to be just one, right? There's going to be multiple chains, multiple coins, multiple tokens. But again, it's all about how do we create an exchange or a translation that happens seamlessly between them. Then we look at the software. The software right now, most of the things that we see are either gaming software, which the most predominant ones are Unreal and Unity, or being able to use your computer so as an WebXR. Then the world building, which is the actual design or the architectural design, what we would call, and not necessarily that has to be architectural, because it could just be like a green land or a lush forest, or a cloud space for the galaxy. But the world building is a component of like the visual 3-dimensional component of it. The marketplace is the place where we're going to be seeing the trading, the transactions of the assets that are inside of it. And then the communication is what is going to allow us to build that community, right? Because this is all by design. The way that people communicate, the way that people transact, the way that people move within worlds, it's all by design. So you'll be seeing that through different metaverses. They all slightly have different rules, but also all of this starts slightly creating different types of social behaviors. So I think it's very important for both the creators and the users to be very conscious that as we're designing these spaces, they're designing the way that we operate between them or inside of them, and it also starts changing the way that society and the economy evolves based on that as well. So another aspect that I think is really important to think about is that when we're talking about connecting with global communities, it's there are parts that have to do with access and data, which is 2 points that I had not mentioned before. And it's that right now all the metaverses that exist, they're open, right? You get in, you go to a building, you get to access it. Everyone is the same. Everyone has the same opportunity or the same access level to see things. But the more complex these systems become, and the more use cases each of these digital architecture or virtual architectural spaces can have, you realize that there's going to be need to have different layers of accessibility. So one, let's say, is going to be for the customers or the general audience. One may be for the actual people that work inside of the space that may want to have control control to databases or to things that are visually that other people should not have. And then there could be also that depending on ticket sales, like being able to have gated access or different tiers of gated access, like the VIP versus the non-VIP, you end up creating all these layers that can be actual physical spaces, or it can just be like an overlay of the same space. So like a space, like a room could be the same room, but people can see different things based on those layers of access. And then the last component here, which I think is important to highlight, is that top layer, which is of data. Like data is very important. Data is being tracked, and that whether that data belongs to us or belongs to the platform has to do whether it's centralized or not, and other components as well. But I think what's really important to think here is that all this data that is being collected and used is going to potentially and hopefully benefit the experience. So it's very important to as a platform designer, but also as a user, to be very conscious of what is being collected, how that data is being used, and how we could use it in the more ethical way possible. So here I have 2 slides which basically just break down the examples of this opportunity, right? Which is that when we're creating this intersection between digital and virtual worlds, we're really allowing allowing the user to connect with a global audience. So, for example, when we looked at Billie Eilish's concert during COVID, and this is something that concerts are still coming up. It's a little bit different right now, as all the platforms are more under development than the process of development. So you see less virtual concerts than you did during COVID. But Billie Eilish had almost 70 million fans that she reached, which accounts for 90% total of her social media followers. And when you look at the concerts that she does in the physical space, approximately 1 to 2 million fans get to attend because of the amount of seating for each concert, because of the physical location. There's just a lot of constraints, right? And then the second part, which is this attains a little bit more to the model of Superforest, is that how can we use also the tracking of different data sets that have more to do with sustainability, with carbon credits, with even sustainable rewards, be something that could play a part into the metaverse. And I think that the more conscious driven we can be in our design and the different aspects that we want to track, I guess the better opportunities there are to do greater things for the world. So imagine if by planting virtual trees, we could rebuild an entire forest. So just to conclude right now, and this is more of inviting everyone in a very inspirational way to be a part of this movement, because as you know, the metaverse is very early, still in the very nascent years of its time. This is an opportunity for all of us to play in whatever industry we are, an important role in designing it and building it. So we shape our tools, and then our tools shape us. So there's a good amount of responsibility, but in the best way possible, also of creativity of how we want to do this. So we are inevitably all part of designing the world we live in. So let's design the metaverse together. So thank you so much.